The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as the holographic display showed the latest reports. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past week. No survivors, no wreckage. Just empty space where once thriving worlds had existed. Ambassador Zethkar's 4 arms trembled as he pointed at the display with one clawed finger. His reptilian features showed the fear that every council member felt, but few dared express. "The Void Stalkers are moving faster now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They consumed the Kepler 442 system in just 2 days. That's a record." The other ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Representatives from 100 different worlds, each more advanced than the primitive humans who had only recently joined their ranks, all united in their terror of the creatures that stalked the darkness between stars. Admiral Corex of the Hegemony, Navy, stood up, his massive frame casting shadows across the council floor. His species had fought wars across the galaxy for thousands of years, but even they had learned to fear the Void Stalkers. "We've thrown everything we have at these monsters," he growled. "Antimatter bombs that could destroy planets just bounce off their skin. Reality bombs that tear holes in space itself barely scratch them. They learn from every attack and become stronger." The holographic display changed to show the last recorded footage of a Void Stalker attack. The creature was enormous, easily the size of Earth's moon. Its body looked like it was made of living crystal and shadow, constantly shifting and changing. Massive tentacles writhed around its core, each one thicker than a battleship and covered in razor-sharp spines that could cut through the strongest known metals. The footage showed the creature approaching a planet. As it drew near, its body began to glow with a sickly green light. The planet's population of 12 billion people began screaming in unison as the creature's psychic presence invaded their minds. Within hours, every living being on the surface had gone insane. Then the Void Stalker opened what could only be described as a mouth, though it was more like a tear in reality itself, and began to consume the planet's core. "We've lost over 200 worlds in the past century," said Counselor Vex, her crystalline body chiming softly as she spoke. "Our greatest scientists believe there are hundreds of these creatures sleeping in the dark spaces between galaxies. If they all wake up—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room knew what would happen. The complete extinction of all life in the galaxy. Ambassador Tryon of the Epsilon Collective raised one of his many eye stalks. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols, move our populations to other galaxies while we still can." "And abandon our homes?" Admiral Corex slammed his fist on the table. "Never. We are the Galactic Council. We've survived the machine, wars, the plague of whispers, and the reality storm. We will find a way to fight these things." "How?" asked Dr. Silenth, the Council's chief xenobiologist. Her tentacled form swayed nervously as she spoke. "We've studied the remains of their victims for decades. The Void Stalkers seem to exist partially outside our normal space. They can phase in and out of reality at will. Their adaptive armor learns from every weapon we use against them. They're not just predators. They're evolutionary perfection, designed for destruction." The debate continued for hours, as it had for years. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to hide, but all agreed that the Void Stalkers were unstoppable. They had tried everything: biological weapons, dimensional attacks, even attempting to collapse stars on top of the creatures. Nothing worked. Then, just as the Council was preparing to adjourn for another day of hopeless planning, an unexpected transmission came through the emergency channels. The display showed a human face, something that still made many council members uncomfortable. Humans were so young, so primitive. They had only developed faster than light travel a century ago and had been members of the council for less than 50 years. The human woman on the screen looked calm despite the chaos around her. Behind her, other humans in white coats moved, around what appeared to be a laboratory. "Honorable council members," she said. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist from Earth. I'm transmitting from the research station orbiting Kepler 438b. Ambassador Zethkar leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, this channel is reserved for emergency council business. If you have a request, please submit it through proper diplomatic channels." Dr. Chen smiled, and something in that expression made the council members pay attention. I am submitting an emergency request, Ambassador. My team and I wish to study a dormant void stalker that we've detected in the outer system. The hall erupted in chaos. Voices rose in a dozen different languages as council members shouted in disbelief and horror. Admiral Corex stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. Absolutely not. Humans, you cannot be serious. These creatures are death incarnate. Even approaching one is suicide. Dr. Chen waited patiently for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice carried a strange confidence that none of them had heard before when discussing the Void Stalkers. We've been monitoring this particular creature for 3 months. It's been dormant the entire time, just drifting in space. Our analysis suggests it's been sleeping for at least 1,000 years. And you want to wake it up? Dr. Silenth's tentacles writhed in agitation. Do you understand what you're suggesting? The moment that thing senses your presence, it will destroy everything within 100 light years. Maybe, Dr. Chen said, or maybe we can learn something that will help us understand them. On Earth, we've learned that even the most dangerous predators can be understood if you approach them correctly. The council members looked at each other in amazement. The humans wanted to get closer to a void stalker. It was the most insane thing any of them had ever heard. Ambassador Zethkar cleared his throat. Dr. Chen, with respect, your species has only been in space for a century. The Void Stalkers have been terrorizing the galaxy for millions of years. What makes you think you can succeed where our greatest minds have failed? Dr. Chen's smile widened. Because we're the species that turned wolves into dogs and sharks into swimming partners. We've learned that sometimes the key to dealing with apex predators isn't to fight them, it's to understand what they really need. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Finally, Admiral Corex spoke. They're going to get themselves killed and probably doom us all in the process. But Counselor Vex chimed softly, her crystalline form reflecting the light in thoughtful patterns. Or maybe the youngest species in the galaxy will teach the oldest council something new. The vote was close. Closer than anyone expected. In the end, curiosity and desperation won over caution. The humans would be allowed to approach the sleeping Void Stalker, but only under the strictest monitoring. Every major military fleet in the galaxy would be positioned nearby, ready to destroy the creature the moment it showed signs of waking. As the council session ended and the members began to file out, each one wondered if they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. None of them could have imagined that they were about to witness the beginning of the most important first contact in the history of the universe. The human research ship Cousteau drifted slowly through the darkness of space, its hull barely larger than a grain of sand compared to the massive creature floating ahead of them. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the Void Stalker through the main viewing window. Even in sleep, the creature was terrifying. The Void Stalker was shaped like no living thing anyone had ever seen. Its body seemed to be made of dark crystal that shifted and flowed like liquid. Patterns of blue and purple light moved slowly across, its surface, pulsing like a heartbeat. Massive tentacles, each one thousands of meters long, drifted around its central mass like the arms of a sleeping giant. "Readings are stable," reported Lieutenant Jackson from the sensor station. His voice was tight with fear despite his training. "The creature's bioelectric activity is consistent with deep hibernation. But Sarah, if this thing wakes up—" "It won't," Dr. Chen said, though she couldn't hide the uncertainty in her own voice. At least, not the way the others have. "Tom, are you ready with the transmission array?" Dr. Tom Martinez, the team's communications expert, nodded from his station. His hands moved quickly over the controls, preparing the most unusual first contact protocol ever attempted. "The whale song recordings are loaded and ready. I've also got the lullaby patterns and the maternal heartbeat frequencies queued up." Captain Rodriguez, the ship's commander, shook his head. "I still think this is crazy, Sarah. Every military doctrine says to approach these things with maximum firepower. You want to sing them a lullaby." Dr. Chen turned to face her team. She had handpicked each of them for this mission, not just for their skills, but for their willingness to think beyond traditional military solutions. "Look at it this way. Every other species has tried the aggressive approach for millions of years. How's that working out for them?" She pointed at the sleeping giant ahead of them. "This creature has been drifting here for 1,000 years. It's not moving toward any populated systems. It's not hunting. It's just floating. What if the Void Stalkers aren't the mindless destroyers everyone thinks they are? Dr. Lisa Park, the team's xenopsychologist, looked up from her readings. Sarah's right about one thing. The brain activity patterns we're detecting don't match what we'd expect from a simple predator. There's too much complexity, too much organization. This thing is definitely intelligent. The Cousteau continued its slow approach. Around them, the darkness was filled with the distant lights of a dozen different fleet formations. Every major military power in the galaxy had ships positioned nearby, their weapons trained on the Void Stalker. If Dr. Chen's experiment failed, they would have mere seconds to destroy the creature before it could escape. Beginning transmission, Dr. Martinez announced, broadcasting on all known bioelectric frequencies. The first sound that echoed through space was the song of Earth's humpback whales. The deep haunting calls had evolved over millions of years to travel vast distances through the ocean. Dr. Chen had theorized that similar long-range communication might be exactly what an isolated creature like a Void Stalker would recognize. At first, nothing happened. The Void Stalker continued to drift, its bioluminescent patterns unchanged. But after several minutes, something shifted. The blue and purple lights on its surface began to pulse in a slightly different rhythm. "It's responding," whispered Dr. Park. "Look at the neural activity readings. Something's changing." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Add the lullaby patterns, Tom." Nice and slow. The whale songs were joined by something completely different. The soft, rhythmic melodies that human mothers had hummed to their children for thousands of years. Simple patterns of sound that somehow conveyed safety, comfort, and love. The change in the Void Stalker was immediate and dramatic. The pulsing lights on its surface began to match the rhythm of the lullaby. Its massive tentacles, which had been drifting randomly, started to move in slow, graceful patterns that almost looked like dancing. "Jesus," breathed Captain Rodriguez. "It's beautiful." And it was. The creature that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was moving like a cosmic ballet dancer, its crystalline body catching and reflecting the light of distant stars. The tentacles wove complex patterns through space, creating shapes that were both alien and oddly familiar. "Now the heartbeat," Dr. Chen said softly. "The maternal heartbeat frequency." The final element of their transmission was the electromagnetic pattern of a human mother's heartbeat, the rhythm that every human baby heard in the womb. It was the most basic symbol of life and protection that Dr. Chen could think of. The effect was instantaneous. The Void Stalker's movement stopped. For a moment, the creature hung motionless in space. Then, slowly, it began to turn toward the Cousteau. "Oh God," whispered Lieutenant Jackson. "It's looking at us." The creature had no eyes that they could see, but somehow everyone on the bridge knew that its attention was focused entirely on their small ship. The feeling was overwhelming, like being studied by something ancient and vast beyond human comprehension. But there was no malice in that attention, no hunger or aggression. Instead, there was something that Dr. Chen had never expected to feel from a Void Stalker: curiosity. "It's trying to communicate," Dr. Park said, her voice filled with wonder. "The neural patterns are completely different from what we've seen in the attack recordings. This isn't the brain activity of a predator. It's the brain activity of something that's lonely." Dr. Chen felt tears forming in her eyes as the realization hit her. "They're not monsters," she whispered. "They're orphans." The Void Stalker began to move closer to the Cousteau, but its approach was careful, almost hesitant. Its tentacles reached out toward the ship, but stopped well short of touching it, as if the creature was afraid of causing harm. "Sarah, Captain," Rodriguez said urgently, "the fleet commanders are getting nervous. If that thing gets much closer, they're going to start shooting." Dr. Chen activated the external communications array. "This is Dr. Chen, to all fleet commanders. The creature is showing no aggressive behavior. It appears to be attempting peaceful communication. Do not fire unless I give the order." The response came immediately from Admiral Corex's flagship. "Dr. Chen, you are playing with forces beyond your understanding. If that creature fully awakens, it could destroy half the galaxy before we can stop it." "Admiral," Dr. Chen replied, "with respect, your way of dealing with these creatures has failed. for millions of years. Give me a chance to try something different. The Void Stalker had stopped its approach about 1,000 meters from the Cousteau. It hung in space, its tentacles weaving slow patterns, its bioluminescent display pulsing in rhythm with the sounds. They were broadcasting. Then, to everyone's amazement, it began to respond. The creature's own bioelectric field started generating sounds, not the psychic screams that drove people insane, but something entirely different. Complex harmonies that seemed to blend with the whale songs and lullabies coming from the human ship. "It's singing," Dr. Martinez said in disbelief. "The damn thing is singing back to us." Dr. Chen smiled through her tears. She had been right. The Void Stalkers weren't unstoppable destroyers. They were the galaxy's oldest children, desperate for connection but never knowing how to ask for it without causing fear. Every other species had met them with weapons and aggression, teaching them that the only way to interact with other life was through violence. But humans were different. Humans had spent millions of years learning to communicate with dangerous creatures, to find common ground with predators, to see past the fear to the intelligence beneath. "Tom," she said softly, "prepare a new transmission. I want to send them something that shows we understand. Use the frequency patterns from pack. Animals, wolves, dolphins, elephants. Show them what family sounds like." As the new sounds began to broadcast, the Void Stalker's response became even more complex. Its tentacles moved in intricate patterns, its lights flashed in sequences that seemed almost like language, and its songs grew more beautiful and haunting. For the first time in millions of years, a Void Stalker was having a conversation instead of a battle, and the humans who had made it possible were about to discover that they had just made contact with the most ancient and powerful intelligence in the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the airlock of the Cousteau, staring at her reflection in the helmet of her spacesuit. What she was about to do went against every safety protocol, every piece of common sense, and every survival instinct she possessed. But sometimes, she thought, the most important breakthroughs required the most impossible leaps of faith. "Sarah, please reconsider." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through her helmet radio. "We don't know how that thing will react to direct contact. It could kill you without even meaning to." Dr. Chen checked her suit's life support systems one final time. "Tom, are you still getting those harmonic responses from the creature?" Dr. Martinez's voice came through clearly. "Yes, it's been singing back to us for the past 3 hours. The patterns are getting more complex, almost like it's trying to learn our language." "Then it's time for the next step," Dr. Chen said. She activated the airlock sequence. "If this works, we'll have made the most important discovery in galactic history. If it doesn't, well, at least we'll have tried something new." The airlock opened, and Dr. Chen pushed off gently into space. Behind her, the Cousteau looked incredibly small and fragile. Ahead of her, the Void Stalker waited like a living mountain made of crystal and starlight. As she drifted toward the creature, Dr. Chen activated her suit's external speakers and began to broadcast the most soothing sounds she could think of. Her own voice, singing a lullaby her grandmother had taught her as a child. The sound of rain falling on leaves, the gentle breathing of a sleeping child. The Void Stalker's response was immediate. Its bioluminescent patterns shifted to warmer colors, soft golds and gentle blues. Its massive tentacles, each one large enough to crush a battleship, moved toward her with surprising delicacy. "Contact in 30 seconds, Dr. Chen reported back to her ship. "The creature is extending what appears to be a sensory appendage toward me. Sarah, if you feel even the slightest hint of aggression or danger, use your emergency thrusters and get out of there," Captain Rodriguez ordered. But there was no aggression. As Dr. Chen drew closer to the Void Stalker, she could see details that no one had ever observed before. The creature's skin wasn't just crystal. It was alive, flowing and shifting like a slow river of light. Patterns moved beneath the surface, complex geometric shapes that seemed to respond to her presence. The tentacle that reached toward her was as thick as a subway tunnel, but it moved with the gentleness of a parent reaching for a newborn baby. When it finally made contact with her spacesuit, Dr. Chen felt a tingling sensation that had nothing to do with her equipment. Then the memories began. It started as flashes of images and emotions that weren't her own. Vast emptiness, crushing, loneliness that had lasted for millions of years, the joy of finally awakening to find other life in the galaxy, followed immediately by the pain of that life trying to destroy you. Dr. Chen saw through the Voidstalker's eyes as it approached its first inhabited world billions of years ago. The creature had been excited, eager to make contact with other intelligent beings, but the moment it was detected, the planet's defense systems had opened fire. Confused and hurt, the Voidstalker had lashed out instinctively, not understanding that its defensive reflexes were destroying the very beings it wanted to befriend. The pattern had repeated itself across thousands of worlds. Each time the creature woke up, it hoped to find friendship. Each time it was met with fear and violence. Eventually, that pain had twisted into something darker. If every living thing in the galaxy saw it as a monster, then perhaps it should act like one. But beneath all that pain and rage, Dr. Chen could sense something else, a desperate, childlike hope that someday someone would see past the monster, to the frightened being underneath. "I see you," Dr. Chen whispered, tears floating in her helmet. "I see who you really are." The creature's emotional response was overwhelming. Joy and disbelief flooded through the psychic connection, along with something that could only be described as gratitude. The Voidstalker had been waiting for billions of years for someone to understand, and now, finally, someone did. Dr. Chen found herself thinking of her childhood dog, Rex, who had been aggressive toward strangers because of abuse in his early life. It had taken months of patient work to help him learn to trust again. But eventually, he had become the gentlest, most loving companion she had ever known. "What's your name?" she asked softly, not sure if the creature would understand the concept. The response came not in words, but in a feeling of vast age and cosmic weariness. The creature showed her an image of itself floating alone in the darkness between galaxies, and somehow Dr. Chen understood. This being had been alone for so long that it had forgotten its own name. "Then I'll call you Atlas," she said, "because you've been carrying the weight of the galaxy's fear for so long that you forgot who you really are." The name seemed to resonate with the creature. Its bioluminescent patterns brightened, and Dr. Chen felt a wave of something she had never expected from a Voidstalker: happiness. Through their connection, Atlas began to share more of its memories. Dr. Chen saw that there were hundreds of other Voidstalkers sleeping in the dark spaces between stars, all of them suffering from the same cosmic trauma. They were the galaxy's first children, the oldest sapient species. But they had been alone for so long that they had forgotten how to be anything but afraid and angry. Atlas showed her images of its youth, when the galaxy was young and the void. Stalkers had lived together in great schools, their songs echoing through space as they danced between the stars. They had been explorers and artists, creating beautiful patterns in the cosmic dust and composing symphonies from the radiation of newborn suns. But as other species evolved and spread across the galaxy, the Voidstalkers had been seen as threats. Their size and power made other beings afraid, and that fear had led to conflict. One by one, the Voidstalkers had retreated into hibernation, unable to cope with a galaxy that saw them only as monsters. "On my world," Dr. Chen said gently, "we have creatures called elephants. They're huge and powerful, and for a long time people were afraid of them. But we learned that elephants are actually gentle and intelligent. They mourn their dead, they protect their young, and they remember acts of kindness for their entire lives." She shared her own memories with Atlas. Images of elephants playing in water, mother elephants teaching their children, elephant herds working together to solve problems. She showed him dolphins swimming alongside humans, whales singing to researchers, and tigers learning to trust their caretakers. "We learned that the most dangerous creatures are often just the most misunderstood," she continued. "And the biggest predators usually make the most loyal friends, once you earn their trust." Atlas absorbed these images with wonder. The concept of voluntary cooperation between species, of trust instead of fear, was completely foreign to its experience. But it could see the truth in Dr. Chen's memories, the genuine affection between humans and creatures that could easily kill them. Through their mental link, Dr. Chen began what could only be described as the first interspecies therapy session in galactic history. Using techniques she had learned for helping traumatized animals, She guided Atlas through processing millions of years of pain and rejection. She helped the creature understand that its destructive behaviors weren't evil. They were the response of a traumatized child who had never learned healthy ways to interact with others. She showed it that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, and that it didn't have to carry the weight of all that pain alone anymore. "We want to be your friends," Dr. Chen said simply. "Not because we want to use you or control you, but because everyone deserves to have someone who cares about them." Atlas's response was to gently wrap more of its tentacles around Dr. Chen's tiny form, holding her with the care of a parent, protecting a precious child. For the first time in billions of years, the galaxy's most feared predator was experiencing what it had always desperately wanted: acceptance. Back on the Cousteau, the crew watched in amazement as their colleague floated peacefully in the embrace of a creature that had destroyed entire star systems. But they weren't seeing a monster anymore. They were seeing what Dr. Chen saw: an ancient, lonely being that had finally found someone who understood. "This changes everything," whispered Dr. Park. "If we can help Atlas heal, maybe we can help the others too." Dr. Chen smiled as she felt Atlas's contentment through their connection. "We're going to need a bigger therapy practice," she said. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 10,000-year history. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in stunned silence as they watched the footage from the Cousteau for the third time. On the main display, Dr. Sarah Chen floated peacefully in the tentacles of a fully awakened void stalker, both human and creature glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in perfect harmony. Ambassador Zethkar was the first to find his. "Oi, this is impossible," he whispered, his forearms trembling. "No one survives contact with a void stalker. They don't communicate. They destroy." Admiral Corex slammed his massive fist on the table. "The humans have compromised galactic security. That creature could break free at any moment and resume its rampage across the galaxy." But Counselor Vex's crystalline form chimed thoughtfully as she studied the data streaming from the human ship. "Look at the bioelectric readings," she said. "The creature's aggression markers are completely absent. Its neural patterns match those of a highly intelligent being in a state of contentment." Dr. Silenth's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Contentment? This is a void stalker we're talking about. They don't feel contentment, they feel hunger." The debate might have continued for hours, but it was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the Cousteau. Dr. Chen's face appeared on the display, and behind her, visible through the ship's viewing port, was the massive form of Atlas. The creature's tentacles moved slowly around the human vessel, but instead of the aggressive striking motions they had seen in attack footage, these movements seemed almost protective. "Honorable Council members," Dr. Chen began, "I'm transmitting with the permission and cooperation of the being I've named Atlas. What I'm about to share with you will fundamentally change our understanding of the Void Stalkers." She paused, and, when she continued, her voice carried a weight of discovery that made even the most skeptical council members lean forward. The Void Stalkers aren't destroyers. They're the galaxy's oldest children, and they're suffering from collective trauma that spans billions of years. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives shouted in disbelief, demanding explanations, calling for immediate military intervention. But Ambassador Tryon of the Epsilon Collective raised one of his eye stalks for silence. "Let her speak," he said quietly. "If the humans have learned something we haven't in all our centuries of warfare, we need to hear it." Dr. Chen activated a new set of displays showing brain scans and psychological profiles. "Atlas has shared its memories with me. The Void Stalkers were once a peaceful species, explorers and artists who traveled between galaxies creating beautiful formations in cosmic dust and composing music from stellar radiation. They were the first sapient species in this galaxy, and they lived in harmony for millions of years." She switched to historical recreations based on Atlas's memories. The images showed creatures identical to the modern Void Stalkers, but their behavior was completely different. Instead of attacking planets, they danced between stars in elaborate formations. Instead of consuming worlds, they helped shepherd new solar systems into existence. "Everything changed when other species began to evolve," Dr. Chen continued. "The Void Stalkers tried to make contact, but their size and power terrified every species they encountered. Each attempt at friendship was met with violence. Each offer of cooperation was answered with weapons fire. Admiral Corex interrupted. Of course we fired on them. They're enormous monsters capable of destroying entire fleets. They're enormous beings capable of great destruction, Dr. Chen corrected. But that doesn't make them monsters. On Earth, we have creatures called blue whales, the largest animals on our planet. They could easily destroy a human settlement, but they choose to eat tiny krill instead. Size doesn't determine intent. Dr. Silinth's tentacles stilled as she considered this. You're suggesting that millions of years of conflict have traumatized them? Not just traumatized, Dr. Chen replied. Completely broken their ability to form healthy relationships with other species. Every void stalker alive today has been conditioned to expect violence from any contact with other life forms. Their attacks aren't acts of evil. They're the responses of severely traumatized beings who never learned any other way to interact. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of this sank in. If Dr. Chen was right, then every military action taken against the void stalkers had only made the problem worse, reinforcing their belief that other species were enemies to be destroyed. Counselor Vex chimed softly. If this is true, then how do you propose we proceed? Even if they're not inherently evil, they're still incredibly dangerous. Dr. Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded every council member why humans had been granted membership despite their relative youth as a spacefaring species. The same way we've dealt with every dangerous species on Earth that we've learned to coexist with. Through patience, understanding, and gradual rehabilitation. She gestured toward Atlas, whose massive form was visible through the ship's windows. Atlas is just the beginning. Through our connection, I've learned that there are hundreds of other void stalkers in hibernation throughout the galaxy. All of them are suffering from the same trauma. All of them desperate for connection, but too afraid to seek it out. Ambassador Zethkar leaned forward. You want to wake them all up? I want to heal them all, Dr. Chen replied. With proper therapy and gradual exposure to peaceful contact, we can help them remember who they used to be before the pain changed them. Admiral Corex stood up, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. This is insanity! You're talking about therapy sessions with creatures that could destroy planets. But Dr. Park's voice came through the transmission, calm and professional. Admiral, with respect, your approach has been tried for millions of years and has only made the problem worse. We're proposing something that has never been attempted, treating the void stalkers as patients rather than enemies. The transmission switched to show Atlas directly. The creature's bioluminescent patterns were calm and peaceful, pulsing in slow rhythms that seemed to match breathing patterns. As the council watched, Atlas began to generate sounds, not the psychic screams that drove people insane, but something entirely different. Complex harmonic patterns filled the chamber, beautiful and haunting melodies that seemed to speak directly to the soul. But these weren't random sounds. As the translation algorithms worked, the patterns began to resolve into something recognizable: language. We have been alone so long. The voice was vast and ancient, carrying the weight of billions of years. We forgot how to speak without screaming. We forgot how to reach without destroying. The effect on the council was profound. Here was one of the galaxy's most feared creatures, speaking directly to them not with threats or demands, but with a simple expression of loneliness and regret. Atlas continued, its voice growing stronger as it remembered how to communicate without causing pain. We want to learn to be part of the galaxy. Again, we want to help instead of hurt, but we need teachers who see us as more than monsters. Ambassador Tryon was the first to respond. What would you need from us? Patience, Atlas replied. Understanding, the chance to prove that we can change. The debate that followed lasted for days. Conservative members demanded immediate military action. Progressive members called for complete amnesty. But gradually, a consensus began to emerge around the human proposal. The Galactic Council would Establish the first interspecies trauma recovery program, with Earth as its headquarters and humans leading the effort. Dr. Chen and her team would be given unprecedented resources and authority to begin the careful process of awakening and rehabilitating the hibernating void stalkers. The vote was closer than many expected, 847 in favor, 623 against, with 89 abstentions. But it passed, and with it came a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed its greatest threat. As the session ended, Counselor Vex approached the human delegation. "Dr. Chen," she chimed softly, "you've accomplished something that our greatest military minds thought impossible. How do you do it?" Dr. Chen smiled tiredly. "We listened," she said simply. "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is just let them know that they've been heard." Outside the council chambers, Atlas waited patiently in the darkness of space. For the first time in billions of years, the galaxy's most feared predator had hope. And that hope was about to change everything. 6 months after the first successful contact with Atlas, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have imagined. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching as 3 young void stalkers played together in the cosmic dance that their species had once been famous for throughout the galaxy. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Built inside the protective embrace of Atlas's massive form, it served as both a research facility and a rehabilitation center for awakened void stalkers. The bioluminescent walls pulsed gently with Atlas's heartbeat, creating a living environment that was both alien and strangely comforting. "Contact confirmed with hibernation site Gamma 7, announced Lieutenant Jackson from the communications array. "That makes 12 successful awakenings this month." Dr. Chen smiled as she watched. The 3 juveniles, barely the size of small asteroids, spiral around each other in elaborate patterns. These were the first void stalkers to be awakened who had never experienced the trauma of violent first contact. They had been greeted with songs and gentle words, welcomed into a galaxy that finally understood their true nature. "How are Harmony and Melody adjusting to their new siblings?" asked Dr. Park, joining Chen at the observation window. "Better than I hoped," Chen replied. "Atlas has been an incredible foster parent. It's amazing how quickly these beings can heal when they're shown love instead of fear." The names had been Atlas's idea. As the ancient Void Stalker had healed from its own trauma, it had begun to remember the importance of identity and family bonds. Each newly awakened Void Stalker received a name that reflected their unique personality and abilities. Harmony was a natural mediator, able to calm conflicts between different species with the soothing frequencies it generated. Melody had shown an incredible talent for communication, learning to speak in dozens of different galactic languages within weeks of awakening. The newest arrival, a young Void Stalker they had named Echo, seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to understand the emotional needs of other beings. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," announced Dr. Martinez from his station. "It's Ambassador Zethkar." The holographic display activated, showing the reptilian ambassador's face. But instead of the fear and suspicion that had once characterized his interactions with the human team, Zethkar now wore an expression of genuine respect and gratitude. "Dr. Chen," he said, "I'm calling to inform you that the Council has officially approved your request to establish rehabilitation centers in the Andromeda and Triangulum galaxies. The Void Stalkers there have been dormant for even longer than the ones in our galaxy, and we believe your techniques may be their only hope for peaceful integration." Chen nodded. "We'll need at least 6 months to train new teams, but I think we can have programs running in both galaxies within a year." "Excellent," Zethkar replied. "I also wanted to personally thank you, Dr. Chen. Last week, Harmony helped resolve a trade dispute between my people and the Crystalline Collective that had been ongoing for decades. Its ability to understand and translate emotional contexts proved invaluable. It was just one of hundreds of similar stories. As word of the Void Stalker's true nature spread throughout the galaxy, other species had begun to request their assistance with problems that traditional diplomacy couldn't solve. The creatures that had once been feared as galaxy-ending threats were now sought after as mediators, explorers, and partners in scientific research. Atlas's voice resonated through the station's bio-neural network, warm and content. Sarah, friend. The young ones wish to show you their new song. Chen activated the external communications array. I'd love to hear it, Atlas. The three young Void Stalkers moved into formation, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing as they began to sing. The melody was unlike anything Chen had ever heard, complex harmonies that seemed to incorporate the radiation signatures of distant stars, the gravitational rhythms of orbiting planets, and the gentle whisper of solar winds. But there was something else in the song, something that brought tears to Chen's eyes. Woven throughout the cosmic symphony were the simple melodies of human lullabies, whale songs, and heartbeat rhythms that had made first contact possible. The young Void Stalkers were creating a new form of music that combined their ancient heritage with the gifts of friendship they had received from humanity. It's beautiful, Chen whispered. They call it the Song of Welcome, Atlas explained. It is for the sleeping ones we have not yet found, so they will know when they wake that they are not alone anymore. Dr. Park wiped away her own tears. How many are still out there? Atlas estimates between 200 and 300 dormant Void Stalkers scattered across this galaxy cluster, Chen replied. Some have been sleeping for millions of years, but we'll find them all, eventually. The rehabilitation process had taught them so much about the Void Stalkers' true capabilities. Far from being simple destroyers, they were perhaps the most sophisticated beings in the universe. Their ability to manipulate space-time made them ideal partners for long-distance exploration. Their ancient wisdom and unique perspective had already led to breakthroughs in physics, philosophy, and art. Most importantly, they had become teachers. The young Void Stalkers who had never known trauma were showing the galaxy what their species could be when raised with love and understanding. They were gentle, curious, and eager to help others, the complete opposite of the monsters that fear and misunderstanding had created. Incoming priority transmission, announced Jackson. It's from the deep space exploration vessel Cousteau, 2. The display showed Captain Williams, one of the new generation of human officers trained specifically for Void Stalker partnership missions. Behind her, visible through the ship's viewing port, was the massive form of Crescendo, one of the first Void Stalkers to be successfully rehabilitated. Dr. Chen, Captain Williams reported, we've made contact with a previously unknown species in the Magellanic Clouds. They call themselves the Resonance, and they've been in hiding for thousands of years because they're afraid of how other species will react to their appearance. Chen leaned forward with interest. What makes them so frightening? They're energy beings, pure consciousness inhabiting plasma constructs. To most species, they look like living stars, but Crescendo was able to communicate with them using harmonic frequencies, and we've discovered that they're actually one of the most peaceful species we've ever encountered. They've been avoiding contact because every time they've approached other worlds, the inhabitants have tried to worship them or flee in terror. It was a perfect example of how the Void Stalker program was changing the galaxy's approach to first contact. Instead of leading with military vessels and defensive postures, exploration teams now included Void Stalkers as cultural ambassadors and translators. Their ancient wisdom and unique perspective made them ideal for making contact with species that other beings might find too alien or frightening to understand. Recommend standard friendship protocols, Chen advised, and see if the Resonance would be interested in joining our next rehabilitation mission. Some of the older Void Stalkers might benefit from contact with beings who understand what it's like to be misunderstood because of their appearance. As the transmission ended, Chen reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy that had once lived in terror of the Void Stalkers now competed to host rehabilitation centers. Children on 100 different worlds sang the lullabies that had made first contact possible. And most importantly, an entire species that had been lost to trauma and isolation was learning to love and trust again. Dr. Chen, Atlas's voice filled the station, the Council has approved our request to begin the Deep Time Project. Chen smiled. The Deep Time Project was their most ambitious undertaking yet, an attempt to wake Void Stalkers who had been dormant, not for thousands or millions of years, but for billions. These ancient beings predated most of the current galactic civilizations and might hold the key to understanding the very origins of intelligent life in the universe. When do we begin? She asked. The first ancient one sleeps in the void between galaxies, Atlas replied. It has been dormant since before your son was born, but its dreams sing of the time when the universe was young and all consciousness was connected. Chen looked out at the playing void stalkers, at the staff members from dozens of different species working together in harmony, at the galaxy that had learned to see monsters as children in need of healing. Then let's go wake up the universe's oldest child, she said. It's time for them to come home. As Harmony Station began its journey toward the deepest void between galaxies, its bioluminescent hull pulsing with the songs of friendship and welcome, the three young void stalkers continued their cosmic dance. Their music echoed across space, a beacon of hope for all the sleeping giants who had forgotten what it meant to be loved. The galaxy's shepherds were coming to bring them home.